Hey everyone, thanks again for joining us this week for our expert interview series. And this week, I'm super excited to have an absolute direct mail marketing expert, Craig Simpson, come on. Super excited to have him on here. He was referred by another guest, and he's the absolute expert in direct mail marketing. Now, there's been a lot of talk in the group and with our membership clients over direct mail. And why do we use it? And how do we put together effective marketing campaigns? So I figured it'd be awesome to bring the expert in to be able to educate all of us on how to use this to ultimately grow our practices, get more patients, and so on. So thanks for joining us today, Craig. I'll let you introduce yourself for those here who don't know you already.
Yeah, wonderful. I'm so glad to be here talking with everyone. I love working with business owners and obviously love talking about direct mail. So I got my start in direct mail marketing over 20 years ago. I was like 19 years old and I was making these fake rocks out of my parents' garage, like rock climbing holes that you bolt onto a wall. And I thought, well, how can I sell these things? I had everyone tell me that they were wonderful and I should start marketing. So I sent out my first direct mail campaign to 250 people. And I thought, my phone's going off the hook. I'm going to sell thousands of rocks. And my first campaign, after about 5-6 weeks, I realized nobody's calling from it. And I did everything wrong, but I didn't give up. I kept trying and testing. And I eventually found a solution and a method that worked. And I ended up selling over 4,000 rocks through the mail. And I got tired of manufacturing. I hated making the holes, the rocks themselves, but I loved marketing. And so I went to work for a large publishing company and ended up mailing tens of millions of pieces for them. And kind of the rest is history. Since then, I've been doing direct mail and I've had something in the mail every single week for over the past 20 years. So I've done a ton of it.
Awesome. Yeah. I love the story. I think a lot of us are sometimes in that position where we're kind of sick of treating to some degree and we want to hire an associate or someone else to be able to maybe help out. So I think a good place to start off is, why direct mail and why is it different than other streams of media?
Yeah. I mean, this is what I love about direct mail is it's the only media that forces the prospect to do something with your message. So for example, if you're online and you're doing email or banner ads or Google, anything you think of online, a click of a button and that ad, that whatever it is gone. In TV, it's a click of a remote and it's gone. Radio, it's the push of a button in your car and it's gone. Direct mail, you have this thing that you're holding in your hands from the time you go from the mailbox to your kitchen table or desk or wherever you're going, and you're forcing the prospect to do something with it. It's tangible. And by being tangible, boy, you can do some creative things to really make it stand out, right? It's personable. You can make it look like it's a letter from your grandmother or whatever. So it's the one media that you force them to address and do something with. So they can't just let it sit there. They have to physically take it to the recycling bin. They have to open it. They have to do something with your message. And that's why I love, one of the main reasons I love direct mail.
Yeah, I think that's an important part. And a lot of the time people are thinking about, I need to do Facebook and Google and all that kind of stuff. And I know ultimately you're creating a different experience too. And I know, you mentioned a little bit in your book on how you can curate a bit of the experience. You can show up differently than the same sort of ad that everyone sees. That's like, hey, overcome low back pain or get rid of headaches or migraines and that kind of stuff. So I'd like to talk a little bit more specifically about kind of how you even sort of start the process. So I want to put together a campaign that's going to show up differently, expand, not be on a digital platform, so to speak. What's sort of the first step?
Yeah. And I mean, I'll comment on this too. I mean, I'm not against, because I love direct mail, doesn't mean I'm against other media. I think you should do all things, right? Everything you can do marketing wise is good. So not only direct mail,
Diversification.
That's right. The word is, Dan Kennedy always says, the worst number in marketing is one, having one option. And we don't want that. We want multiple options, but I love direct mail. I feel like a huge chunk should be targeting direct mail. But, showing up differently, I mean, there's so many different creative things that we can do. One of the stories I love to tell, back in the 1920s, there's a guy named Robert Collier who was a famous marketer. And he was the first gentleman to send out a $1 bill mailing. And he said he actually mailed out a $1 bill in 1920 something, which was worth a whole lot more then than it is today. And it was a fundraiser for a children's hospital. And he asked the prospects, he said, would you please pen, take this dollar bill and pin additional money to it and mail it back to us to support this hospital? And he had like a 90% response rate. He showed up differently than everyone else back in the day. Robert Collier was also famous for perfuming letters. He took a group of letters and he'd spray perfume over them, so when they arrived, they had a scent to them. The things with direct mail to be creative have been going on for years, but it's kind of got lost with all the online hype and the shiny objects and tools you can use online. People forget about how creative and unique you can be with direct mail. You maybe have seen the trash can mailers. You can mail a letter inside a trash can. You can mail bottles. You can mail bank bags. I mean, if you want to talk about being creative and showing up differently, there are thousands of ways to make yourself stand out in the mail.
Totally, like the 3D mail kind of stuff. I know docs do use like prescription pads and bottles and all that kind of stuff as well. So why do you think, direct mail sort of is not as popular with people? Because, there's a lot of advantages to it. Is it just, you think people are generally going for the lowest hanging fruit or what they perceive to be easier?
No, I think the biggest drawback with direct mail is the cost. You have this thing called postage. You have to apply every time it goes out, and it's expensive. It's not a cheap media, but I'm okay with that because mailboxes are thinner today, meaning there's less mail in them today than there was 20 years ago, which means there's more space for you and less competition. So you pay a premium, but in the end, your response rate will offset that extra cost. It may cost more to market there, but from what I've seen and the numbers I've looked at, you bring in quality customers and you have less competition. Once you show up, you're not going to have 20 other offers vying for your attention. It's just you and maybe one or two others. So it's that's one of the great things that I love about direct mail. And why people don't love it is because of the cost. It's an expensive media to do, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that just goes into like what we talk a lot about, like in our programs, with the lifetime value of the patient, like what they're actually purchasing, and you need to do a really good job at knowing your numbers, so that way you can calculate kind of those ROIs and stuff. Because a lot of people, they sort of get lazy and put out offers that are like, hey, come get one treatment that's heavily discounted, but they don't have a way to sort of convert them. So that totally makes sense. So when you're kind of starting this direct mail process, like where do you start? Are you looking at getting the lists first? Are you building more of your offer, the copy, like what it's going to look like? What's sort of the process?
Yeah, great question. The place I always start is the list, because that's the most important part of the campaign. If you have the best sales copy in the world, like the best copywriter wrote this amazing sales piece for you, and you mail that copy to the wrong list, you're not going to get any response. On the flip side, if you write mediocre copy that's not real good, but it's okay, and you mail it to a good list, you're still going to get response. The list is king. It's the most important part of your campaign. If you don't get the list right, it's going to be tough to succeed with a great copy or a good offer. So that's your starting point. You have to think about who it is you want to mail to. Are you mailing to existing patients or customers, or are you going after cold prospects, new people you want to bring in? So the list is my starting point.
Totally. And where do you kind of get some of that information? I kind of call this as almost like audience insights. So if you're looking at Facebook or Google, you can create these audiences and intents. And I think that a lot of the times people say, well, they don't understand the process. It's just like picking random, postal or zip codes and saying, I'm doing this, but there's actually a lot of intent behind. So I think it's good to chat a little bit about the lists and how to get them and how you can actually have an interest targeting, and it can be extremely detailed, right?
That's right. Yeah. So the number one place that I say is, if someone doesn't know where to start, is to look at your best customers. Who are your best customers? What are their age, their incomes, their hobbies, their interests, their buying habits? The more you know about your best customers, the better job you can go out and find people that look just like them. The number one of the main things to look for is those buying habits. What are they spending money on? Because those are the kind of characteristics that when someone pulls out their wallet and spends money, that is a valuable information, and we can use that to find others that are doing the same thing. And I'm not sure what areas of practice everyone is in, but one of the campaigns that I've done hundreds of times was targeting seniors who are 60 plus, are diabetic, and have a high credit score or value index score, because I want them to have money to pay cash for services for an ailment that they have. So there's ways that we can really narrow down a list to the exact group that you want, if it is who it is you want to go after.
Yeah, and a lot of the people like here, they're some sort of like manual practitioner to some degree. There's some functional medicine and stuff, but it'd be like targeting, for example, like people who have chronic low back pain, or people who are like morbidly obese and need more medical based interventions, shoulder pain, frozen shoulder, those kind of things. In terms of those lists,
depending on the ailment, what ailment we're going after, you can get people who have high blood pressure. You can get people who suffer from migraines or back pain or knee pain. Some of the minor things that might be, if it's specific to an elbow pain, there's not going to be a huge list for that, but maybe it's those with joint pain that we can go after. Some of those ailments we can really target in, and others we kind of have to go a little more broad.
Yeah, totally. And I think the other thing too that's important, what you said, was being able to target based on where they spend money or other attributes, because we want to make sure that the messaging that we're getting, there's a lot of misconceptions when I talk to people. They're sort of like, well, I just throw stuff out. So, and I kind of say, well, because it doesn't resonate with you, and probably the copy and everything else is not so great as well. So to not take your own personal experiences and say, okay, I'm going to toss this something out. But if you're getting the right piece into the right people, that's important, because people sometimes think, well, it's just going out to a bunch of postal addresses or zip codes. And, they don't understand that there is that kind of targeting or the actions and intent that can be behind it. And I guess, like you said, that's pretty much the most important part, because if we don't have the right people dialed in, then we're not so good. So where,
let me just say one other thing on that. So, I think the thing is you got to look at all the different options that you have for marketing, and who are the types of customers I can go after, and then find the group that you can get the most specific with. So if you're a doctor that services those with knee pain, great. Let's find people who have knee pain and purchase some kind of joint cream or something to help relieve that pain that they have, or buy some kind of strap or something that goes in the knee or brace to help them with it. Because now you got a buying habit combined with an ailment. Now, if you don't service knee pain, maybe it's back pain, and we're looking for people who have bought back pain products. Okay, great. Now we've got people who have spent money on an ailment that you can treat and help them with. Really, that's what we want to find. That would be the ideal list for someone in the medical field.
All right. So yeah, and I guess, like, where do you first, when you're starting to look at the list, where do you first start to find some of that information? A lot of the time, like, people are going to need to go back to their niche, who they're looking at, and really understanding them. A lot of the stuff that people say is boring and they don't like to do because it's not as sexy as trying to do ad copy or images. So, like, where do you kind of get some of that information, and how do you find those lists of people?
Yeah. Well, finding out your niche or niche is really, hopefully, who it is you're servicing. If you don't, you got to start paying attention. That's really the reality of it. If you're seeing patients every day, you've got to have a good idea of who the majority of them are, who are the ones you like working with, and the ones that are spending the most money with you. If you don't know that, you need to start taking notes for every customer you see, because you don't want to go off of an idea or an assumption. You want to actually know. So, for example, I was working with a financial advisor, and he wants to promote his new book, and he says, Craig, I want to attract those in their 30s to get my book, and then I'll do, professional services for them. And I'm like, well, Barry, I don't know if this is the right thing for you to do here. Why do you want to go after those in their 30s? He says, well, I feel like it'd be a great group for us just to be in with, because not very many advisors are working with that age group. Like, well, there's a reason for it. Who are most of your customers? Well, most of my customers are 55 and over. Exactly. If we do a campaign to those that are age 30 to 40 and you have no customers there, there's a reason for that. They're not ready for a financial advisor yet. They haven't got to that stage in their life. Now, we can certainly market to them because you want to go to them, but the odds of them responding are very slim. So who he actually needed to go to and we ended up going to was those 50 plus, because that's who his customers are. So we've got to differentiate between who your customers are and who you want to go to. Make sure it's who your customers are, because that's where the sweet spot is. Did I explain that well enough?
Yeah, 100%. And I like keep harping on this all the time because it's super important to know the intricacies of who they are as a person and not necessarily just vague. A lot of the time people are getting into, well, I treat pain, or I do pain relief, or I treat low backs or painful shoulders. But ultimately it's that's just very vague. We need to start getting even more specific into that and understanding, like, what is it limiting them from? What are their habits? Are they buying personal training? Are they, because people could have low back pain, but if they sit at home, they're not active, they are a couch potato, they're not going to be as motivated generally to invest in overcoming the problem, because it's not going to inhibit them as much as someone who's like a cyclist or likes playing golf or something that's inhibited in their life. So, and I guess that will probably also go into maybe the next questions is like framing the offer. If we're knowing who our ideal people are, what are some of the ways that you sort of frame the offer? Because one advantage with direct mail is you're not really censored by like Facebook by saying, I can't say, do you have low back pain? Do you suffer from back pain on Facebook or Google? I need to, be censor myself. So, what are some of the ways that you do that?
The biggest thing is to think about what keeps them up at night. What is the thing that keeps them laying awake at night? And if you can address that and answer that question, give them a solution to that, that will make a phenomenal mail piece. That's the most important thing. So if it's back pain, we've got to address that in the sales piece right up front. We're attacking that issue, and we're talking about the pain points, the different trigger points that they suffer with their back pain. Is it preventing you from going on that bike ride with your grandkids? Is it preventing you from going for that run with your friends? Is it preventing you from dancing again? And you got to talk about that pain with things that they would enjoy, and then provide the solution. It doesn't mean, hey, I'm going to guarantee to fix you. It doesn't mean that you're going to do some kind of malpractice or say something terrible. Instead, it's more of like, hey, I've helped a lot of people. Let's see if it's right for you, right? And here are some things that I've found that can be helpful. If you want to find out more, contact me at X, Y, and Z.
Totally. And I find like a lot of the time, using direct response approach is obviously going to be more effective than a branding of like, hey, my clinic is here. Because a lot of the time people think of print as like, this is where my clinic is. These are the conditions I treat. And what we want to do is make it more specific, I'm assuming, to like one specific problem that you're helping people with. So if I'm targeting just people who are just low back pain are going to perform better than like a general offer. Is that what you're finding usually?
Yeah. The more specific you can be, the better. There's some things that we can't go too detailed, right? You're struggling with just this meniscus in your knee and that's it. That's too narrow, right? So we can talk about knee pain in general, but knee is still a small part of the body. So let's focus on that thing that we're going after. But the more specific you can be, the better response you will get. If you're talking too broad, then you're going to start losing people, because when somebody's reading it, remember this. They're asking the question, what is in it for me? And as soon as it's focused not on them, and it's about something you want to tell them about, like your degrees and the signs you have on your wall and the tests that you've passed, they don't care about that. They care about what's in it for me right now. And so if you're not keeping them engaged and keeping the letter focused on them, you'll lose them. So it's really key to focus on the pain, focus on the solution, and keep the letter all about them.
I love that you said that, because a lot of the time people get caught into, I've got these treatment modalities, or, I treat with shockwave, and they're trying to sell a shockwave service, or like a specific IV or some sort of treatment. And it's like not tied into any specific outcome. And it just sort of feels like, generalized letter, and it's probably going to get filed into the round file, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. People don't care about all that stuff. They want it. Now you can put some of those details in like a bio or something else, but they're not going to read that. The sales portion can't include that. Cannot. It will distract from what you're really trying to sell.
Totally. And in terms of like kind of crafting the offer, because I know a lot of practitioners are worried that, hey, if someone doesn't kind of know who I am, or I don't build the trust because it's a bit more of an intimate relationship of a service, what are some ways that you found to sort of tie in the preeminence for the practitioner or the clinic, so that people feel maybe a little more comfortable, especially in like kind of a COVID world where, depending where people are in Canada and that kind of stuff, there's a lot of uncertainty with like going certain places and knowing who they're interacting with, and that kind of stuff.
So, I mean, I'm not sure if I understand the question. So you're saying like people are uncertain of going to a clinic? Is that concern?
Yeah, I guess like how a lot of the time when like people are looking to choose a practitioner, they like to know who the person is, or how do they establish more preeminence as a practitioner, so that it's not just, hey, some random guy who took a personal training certification is writing how to do back pain instead of a physical therapist who's a doctor.
Well, if we're addressing the most important, the thing that's keeping them awake at night, that pain, and you provide the solution, the other details don't matter quite as much. That can be subtly mentioned in the piece. Like I've developed a system for treating back pain, and I've developed my own method. I call it the XYZ method. And you can subtly mention that and then go back to them. I know doctors have a concern like, well, why would they pick me? If you're providing the solution that's going to help them sleep good at night, and they're not going to have this worry or this pain anymore, they don't care about the credentials. They don't care about where you're located. Some of the docs that I work with, people will travel hours to see them because they've convinced them that they're the best in that space. If you believe that you're good at what you do and you're the best at it, then we need to boldly state that. And we need to be able to be confident that we're providing a solution that's going to help you, or we can or have, So I wouldn't get hung up too much on worrying about your location or what your degrees are or why people wouldn't come to you. Instead, if you're providing a solution that's going to relieve the pain, they don't care about the rest.
Totally. And, kind of using even on a simplified process of like the AIDA of just trying to formulate, the offer, like, is that something where you kind of start off and recommend, for people who are just kind of trying to get into creating the specific offer that they'll be able to mail out?
Yeah, I mean, I love that. I mean, you do need to look at your competition. You need to look at those around you. You need to see if somebody else is doing the same thing you're doing. You've got to know about it, right? As far as like they're doing direct mail, which hopefully they're not, because not a lot of docs are doing.
Not much for healthcare.
So, no, not at all, which is a huge opening, right? And something I want to touch in on later, I was just thinking about this, is the lifetime value and why it's worth doing direct mail for this niche. But I mean, yes, you definitely should go through some marketing channels and things to figure out, what would make you stand out and be unique and different, as well as know if anyone else is doing this in your market. That will help in crafting your letter, but ultimately it's going to be those motivating things that are going to get them to respond.
Totally. And with the letter too, a lot of the time there's concern of like, well, direct mail is not trackable. We don't know if it worked, or we don't know if the person actually took the action. And I always kind of think that's funny because like, in my scenario, if I've had them calling a number, I'll have like a proxy number set up that's, trackable, or a specific landing page and that kind of thing. So do you have any other sort of ways that you found to be able to track? Because that's a lot of the time that's what I hear is people saying, well, it's not trackable.
Yeah, I mean, I hear that. I don't agree with it, though. Tracking is really easy. As you mentioned, you can get a number that's dedicated just for direct mail, right? That's what you put in the piece. And then you can track it. You can have those calls recorded. There's services that do it for real cheap. that you could have 10 different numbers if you wanted to, and they're all recorded, they're all tracked, so you know everyone who called that line came from this direct mail campaign. The same with URLs. You can have a unique URL that only comes from direct mail. And then there's some staff training, for those that slip through. Hopefully your staff is asking, hey, how did you hear about us? Mm-hmm. Those are all important things, but tracking really shouldn't be an issue. Just have a unique phone number or URL, and put that in the piece, and then be able to monitor that to see how many came through.
Totally. And in terms of like kind of setting it up too, do you find that there's different nuances or kind of go-to campaigns, whether it's going to be like a direct straight offer that you would mail, a grouping of people one time, or do you find that mailing like a smaller group of people multiple times? Like, how do you kind of use those different types of campaigns?
It's a great question. That's a really tough one to answer too. It really depends on the market. In some markets, there's enough names, they're a large enough pool of people to go to, that I'll try and not mail to them more than once every 90 days. And I'll just keep rotating the names through. If there's a targeted group that we can hit, we'll spread them out. In other cases, it's a smaller market, and there may only be 500 names available that fit for what you're doing. In that case, we have to mail them multiple times and come up with different styles of mailing. Instead of doing a one-off, maybe it's a two-step mailing, maybe it's a three-step mailing.
Yeah, totally. And for those who are kind of like listening to this too, maybe explain a little bit about like two-step or three-step mailers, and what's difference between each one, and how you can kind of improve the response for smaller groupings.
Yeah, so if we have a targeted list of say 500 people, we really want to get their attention, we could send them out a letter today, and then 7 to 10 days later, mail out another letter or postcard or some other format, and then hit them again another 7 to 10 days later. And you kind of space it out every 7 to 10 days, and you can do it one time or two times or three times. What's important is that the message and offer is congruent. You don't want to mail them an offer for back pain this week and knee pain next week. And you don't want to have this week's response be phone, and next time it's URL and go online. And then what we want is congruent. So we want across those 3 or 4 or 2 steps, whatever you decide, you want to keep the messaging congruent, the style of letter congruent, as far as making sure that offer is the same, the response mechanisms are the same. Now, where do you change between each one? So we know the offer and stuff needs to be congruent. What do we change between each one? We want the style, the look of the piece. It could be a letter one time, a postcard next, some kind of lumpy object the next time. Or it could just be, in some cases, we'll mail 2 letters in a row. 80% of the copy is identical. The thing we change is the introduction. The second one may say, hey, Craig, I sent you this letter last week. I haven't heard from you. I'm concerned. This is your second notice. And then maybe we'll send out a third letter. We'll say, hey, this is your final notice, Craig. I've reached out to you 2 other times. It's my final chance of reaching out to you to tell you about this special opportunity. So there's not like a lot of work to do an extra step. You're not having to recreate all the sales copy. Instead, you can repurpose 80, 90% of it, just change the look of it and change maybe the introduction of it.
So like the headline of just how they would start, and then you don't have to redo different copy every single time. But I think you had one good point too, because I've seen this where people almost shotgun approach it, and they'll do this a lot in digital marketing too, where it's like, hey, you got low back pain, we'll come in for a visit, we'll download this report, watch this webinar, do this thing. And people are getting so many different calls to action that they don't really know which stage it's in. So like, I guess that's partly what you would do with your targeting, is saying, I'm trying to find the people who are like the fastest movers and mail those people first, like most likely to take action. And then are you doing different campaigns for people who are kind of like slower movers, or, different types of offers to people who didn't take you up on the first offer? Or are you only ever doing like solely just book this back appointment?
Yeah, no, great question. So for me, I would have multiple offers that I can send to them. And maybe I start out with the first 3 or 4 campaigns for back pain. And then I give the list a rest. I don't want to hit it right again. Wait 60 days and then offer them knee pain, and then wait 60 days and offer them something else. But each group of campaigns, you could have a group of 3 mailings go out in a row offering knee pain. 60 days later, 3 campaigns in a row go out offering back pain solutions. And then, you know what I mean? Like, you can really space it out if you want and change up that offer down the road. It's just when you're doing that 3-step campaign or 2-step, make sure for that specific campaign, it's 100% congruent.
Yeah, totally. And do you have so do you have offers that would send and be like, hey, you've got low back pain, book an appointment with us right now, and then you would change the type of offer based on the response, and or the wording, or like, how do you kind of manage, based on your results?
Yeah, it depends on the list. So let's say those 500 people were, hey, I got them, they all bought a joint pain cream reliever. Great. I don't know if it's back, elbow, knee, what it is. So I'm going to have to target a couple different things with this one list. If it's only a back pain list, that's the only offer we're going to make to them, is just back pain stuff only. So it really depends on the list. Is it more general and you've got to hit them with different offers, or is it specific and you can only hit them with the one type of offer?
Totally. That makes sense. And when you put these campaigns out, and you're kind of measuring your ROI and response, like, what are some key numbers that you're looking for to determine, like, if this is a successful campaign, or I guess more importantly as well, like, what to change or what went wrong? So like with Facebook ad or Google, a lot of people understand, like, well, I can look at CPL or click-through rates and that kind of stuff. Are there similar things that you look at when running these campaigns?
Yeah. So my biggest indicator that I look at is the lifetime value of the customer. I have a good idea. You need to know, what is the average customer worth? And let's say the average customer is worth, like in dental, the average customer is worth like $1,200. For a short period of time. We're not talking like for 10-year patient, but like for a 2-year patient. And so if I can acquire them for $300, I'm thrilled, because I know I'm going to make X amount of dollars off of them over the next 2 years. So really, that's what I'm looking at. I need to know how much, if that client is worth $10,000, then how much am I willing to spend on a campaign to generate a $10,000 client? Oh, maybe I'm willing to spend $1,000. So that means maybe I can be more aggressive in my marketing, send more mail pieces, send more lumpy mail. I really need to know what the value is of the customer so that I can determine what my spend is going to be to acquire those customers. And that tells me whether or not it's profitable or not. If I can't acquire them for $300, but I need to acquire them for $300, then that campaign's not successful. On the flip side, if I'm acquiring them for $250 and I had a $300 threshold, then great, I'm going to do that all day long.
Just scale it and spend more, essentially.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. And in terms of response rates and tracking ROIs, what are sort of typical timeframes with the campaigns that you find where you can sort of objectively say, okay, I got this ROI? Yeah.
So with first class mail, from the time you mail it, once that first response comes in, which is usually within 3-4 days, at that point, we start counting days in the marketing campaign from the time that the first person responds. After 20 to 23 days, you should have 80% of your responses in. After that, it's going to take another 20 days for the rest to trickle in. But within 20 days, you'll have a good idea of the majority of the responses will be in. You'll be able to do some evaluation. If it's standard mail, you got to bump that up to 30 days out, and then it takes a full 60 days for the campaign. So within a month, if first class mail, you're totally certain of whether this campaign is going to be successful or not. As far as the lifetime value of the customer, that may take longer, right? It's not like they're going to spend all their money the first month. It may take months down the road before you achieve all that.
Yeah, totally. And that's why it's important to know those numbers of what someone is. Because if you only see them come in on $100, and you spent 300, but the lifetime, they're going to come back 3 times a week for the next year or whatever it is, then it's going to be more. What are sort of response rates? Because a lot of times people look at it and say, well, I sent 1,500 letters, and I got like 50 people responding to me. So they kind of look at what are sort of average things that you'd sort of expect.
Yeah. Boy, that
I know it's going to vary. I know it's going
yeah,
to
it
vary,
is.
but
There's house file mailings going to existing customers that we do, where we get 6, 7, 8, 9% response rate. That's through the roof, right? That's really good. There are campaigns that I'm doing that are to house files where we get a third of a percent response rate. So 1/3 of 1%, and we're selling, but we're selling a $2,000 product, right? So then it's super profitable. There are times when we're doing acquisition campaigns to cold prospects, and we're getting 4% to opt in to watch a sales video. Well, that's huge, but they're just cold prospects opting in. There's times we're making a direct sale and we're getting a 0.5% response rate. It's really all over the board. What's important is not necessarily the response rate, it's whether or not we have a positive ROI. And that goes back to what is your lifetime value? How much can you afford to spend? If you achieve that goal, then this is going to be a profitable campaign. So response rate is going to be all over the board. It's really hard to give a specific number unless I know the niche and the campaign and the offer.
totally. And that's part of the reason I asked the question too, because people get into vanity metrics. The same thing with like digital and everything else is like, I got so many likes or impressions or, leads, but at the end of the day, you want to have paying patients that are on the schedule who are becoming assets that can, stay, pay, and refer, so to speak. Right.
Yep. Exactly.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And so I know we talked like a little bit about the process, the list, and putting everything together. Where are some kind of common go-tos to sort of help facilitate this? Because obviously we don't want to be sending this by hand. We want to be able to use like a service. So like, EDDM, or like what's sort of your process on how you set some of these up?
Yeah, it really depends on how big of campaign. If you're just mailing out 500 pieces or 1,000 pieces, I would suggest working with a local print shop to have them help print your pieces, and maybe it's your office that's handwriting the address on there or something. If you're doing a larger campaign, like a national campaign, then of course you're going to want to enlist a bigger printer and bigger mail facility. But oh boy, it's so hard. I have a dental office that I work with, and they'll have a campaign where they'll do 250 pieces, and it's for specifically people who need crowns and they haven't come in and got it done yet. Well, they'll do all that in-house. And then there's a campaign that they'll do to acquire new customers, and they're mailing 5,000 people. Well, they'll farm that out to a printer and have them do it. So the size of the campaign will really determine, how do you do it? Is it an in-house job? Is it someone need to hire a small printer? Do we need to hire a large printer? But yeah, so I hope that helps answer it. If not, let me know and I can dig in deeper.
Yeah, I think a lot of the people who'd be listening to this, they'd be like their first sort of direct mail campaign, and their objective would be really just to start generating some new patients, building more preeminence probably in their direct specific area. So a lot of it is going to be like smaller. A lot of the ones that I've done are like basically sub 10,000 sort of people,
Yep.
with
And that's okay.
more generalized offers, not necessarily like a crowns or knee replacement people or something like that, but it's more like, back pain sufferers or athletes, that kind of thing.
Yep. Here's I think one great tip for everyone. And if you haven't done direct mail yet, the best place to start is to your existing customers. And there's two things you can look at. One, if you've got some kind of new service or something you're offering, go to your existing customers and tell them about it. Try and get them in the door. Tell them about the solutions it can provide for them. If you don't have something new, you've been doing the same old thing for 10 years, there's nothing really new, then go back and do what we call a reactivation campaign. Find customers who haven't been in to see you in the last year or two, and say they haven't been in a year or more. Take a group of them and mail them some kind of special offer. Hey, I haven't heard from you in a long time. I hope you're doing okay. Now's a great time to come in and get that knee checked up on, or that back, or whatever it is, to try and get them back into the office and re-engage them as a client. So the best place to start is going to your house file, your current customers or past customers, and making them some kind of sweet offer to get them back in the doors again. Because that is your lowest hanging fruit, and that's where you can make quick money in direct mail, is with your current database of customers.
Yeah, super important. We talk a lot about reactivation and like the 9-word emails and that kind of stuff that we can send out as well. So that's a super good point. And in terms of, sort of mailing, do you generally recommend or do like internal, external campaigns, like where you're mailing people? I know, like, I like to mail people a lot of like who are our patients, like just mailing them specific offers. I mean, we just handwrite them in the clinic itself. But do you have specific strategies that you find work for generating referrals or creating better connection between your current patient base?
Yeah, I mean, there's really, the biggest word here is testing. There's a lot of things you got to test to find out what's going to work best for your niche and your customers. The things that the best advice I can give with starting a campaign without having any experience in direct mail is, one, a handwritten envelope is going to get open more than any other. So if you can just make it look personal, like your grandma sent it, don't put it in a standard number 10 business envelope. Instead, put it in a smaller envelope, make it a light green one, or make it the size of a wedding invitation or a birthday card. Use that style of envelope. Have someone on your team handwrite an address and put a live stamp on it. That there will all, I mean, the open rate on an invitation style piece is like 99%. I mean, who throws away something that looks like it's a wedding invitation or a birthday card? Nobody does. 2, don't put your return address on there, because if they see who it's from, then they're going to have a preconceived idea about what's inside. So don't tell them, make it a surprise. Now you've got the envelope, they're going to open it. Boom, now they've opened it up, and then you're going to start with a great headline. Now, that's where the sales copy comes in. You've achieved it getting their hands, you've achieved open. Now you got to get in the sales copy. You've got to have something solid to keep them engaged and keep them reading.
First step is to get them to open it, if it's a letter, I guess, right? And then the next step is to get them to start to read and sort of engage and whatnot. Yeah, and I think that's it's a cool point to say. It's like, you want to create a better experience than just like putting a postcard and sending the regular sort of 4x6 or whatever that comes into the mail. You want to be able to test out different sort of segments. So like, when someone's putting together, their first sort of campaign, do you usually start out by having them do like a general postcard or a brochure, or like or do you do something fancy right away? Like, what do you usually recommend for someone if they were just starting out?
I would start with just a basic letter, but in a unique envelope. Start out with something simple. You don't need to go elaborate. You don't need to do, fancy anything. Just start out with a regular, maybe it's a smaller envelope, maybe it's the invitation style. Start out with an envelope. That's best. I mean, a basic letter inside an envelope. That's really the easiest way and easiest starting point. What I can tell you not to do is don't do a postcard. Everyone wants to do postcards because they're cheap and they're easy and they're quick and they're short, but you get what you pay for. I only like postcards for a few things. One of them is a reminder to a mailing, like you've sent out a letter and then you follow up with a postcard later on saying, hey, I haven't heard from you. I sent you a letter last week. I like postcards for that. And I like postcards to drive people to a webinar or a teleseminar, but I don't like them for general communication. One other caveat too, it does work well for like a pizza place, an auto repair shop, dry cleaners, those kind of things with low priced offers, but it's not going to work for anything in professional services.
Yeah, especially like cash pay therapy services where people are going to be paying more. Maybe if you're doing like a discount treatment or something like that for $30 in the area, but that's about it. So yeah, and a lot of people I think don't have success because when I look at mail that they've done before, it's usually like a postcard or it's some sort of flyer or it's an insert or something inside of like something that just gets thrown out to begin with. So, okay, cool. Yeah. So definitely for those of you who are listening, do a letter, make it look more personalized, and, make sure you're always testing, it sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah. Always test. You can always find a way to beat it. You can always find a way to make it better. So you got to be really scientific about it and try and say, okay, what can I test against this? What can I do next time it's a little different? And does it work better or worse?
Totally. So yeah, I appreciate you kind of coming in and sharing all these concepts, and want to make sure that I put it into context for these people. So kind of like the steps to, really having a successful direct mail campaign comes down to, number one, we really got to know who that ideal person is that we're trying to to get in as much intent as possible behind them, what their buying habits are, and then getting the lists essentially, so that way we're able to target those people. Then we need to really frame the offer, not talking about generalization, but we want to frame the problem and the solution and have one call to action, so that ultimately we're able to, get the person to track the response and what the ROI is going to be on that. And ultimately, the most important thing is we need to know our lifetime value of the patient, because if we don't know that, it's going to be extremely challenging for us to, number one, track, and it may be working and we actually don't know if it's working because we're not, dialed in with what those specific metrics are. It's probably going to take 20, 30 days in order to judge the overall effectiveness of most of the responses. Is that right? Or did I miss anything else?
Right. Yeah, you got it. Good job. You got it dialed in.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you popping on here and sharing your expertise. And for those of you who are listening to this, like, direct mail, I think is a huge part, or should be a huge part to your marketing, because it's one thing that you really have control over, and it's less nuanced than when an algorithm changes or your ad account gets banned or you can and can't say different things. So I've always been an advocate of having multiple forms of streams of marketing, and direct mail, newspaper, other print media is always another way to get you to show up differently. So if you haven't been diversifying, now's a really good time to start experimenting, because like Craig said, there's less competition in the mailbox, and ultimately, there's a huge opportunity, especially when you know your lifetime value for those patients, to make money, show up differently, and just ultimately have another avenue to reach different types of people, especially those who are more difficult, like older populations of people who are not really on Facebook or these kind of other social media platforms. So any sort of final thoughts or anything you wanted to bring up before we sign off?
Just don't underestimate the power of direct mail. It's totally worth giving it a shot. Try it to your house file. And if at that point, if you can't succeed with that, then don't go on anymore. But I fully believe if you do some campaigns to your existing customers, you're going to see a positive ROI. And that in turn is going to give you more motivation to go ahead and test, hey, let's figure out how to bring in new customers. I'm fully confident that you guys can succeed at this. I've seen tons and tons of businesses succeed with direct mail, so I believe you guys can too. So good luck to everyone. I hope everyone has great success with the mail.
Awesome. And for those of you who want to learn more from Craig, where can they find you and get help?
Yeah, the best way is just to go to my website. I've got a bunch of resources there. I've got free blogs and email lists you can get on to follow stuff on direct mail. And so you can reach me at simpson-direct.com, or you go into Google and type in Craig Simpson direct mail and my website will pop up. But it's simpson-direct.com, and lots of resources and ways to contact me and so forth there.
Awesome. I'll make sure I link it below. So thanks again for coming on and sharing your expertise. And for those of you listening to this, make sure you get out there and start taking action. Thanks again.
Thanks.